One of our speakers tonight, Dr. Kelsey, we were in a conversation beforehand, and we got on to the topic of what the Louisville Forum is. The Louisville Forum, true to the mission of this organization, our board members' diverse and often contrasting viewpoints, but we are united in our commitment to host meaningful discussions, welcoming opinions different from our own. And you know what I was talking to Dr. Kelsey about was just that, is that what the Louisville Forum stands for. We are a very proud civic organization. In this past year alone, the Louisville Mayor, Chief of Police, Chief of the Fire Department, the Senate Minority Leader, and the House Whip all spoke at our events. We hosted election analysis, legislative previews, a debate about Amendment 2, public funding towards public schools. We've had discussions on the present state and future of downtown, Louisville arts, and Louisville small businesses. One thing I do want to do is that tonight there's been a lot of effort that went into this. I really want to thank, and all year long, and Mr. Vincenzo, I'm glad you're here. We've had such a wonderful year going to your restaurant. So thank you, Mr. Vincenzo here. I also do want to just say thank you to our board members. If our board members are here, if you would please stand up so we can all give you thank you. And really, I do want to thank every one of you, every one of these board members. This has been such a great board, and it's been such a rewarding year working with our board members because it is such a team effort, all the stuff that we do to make sure that the Louisville Forum and our mission of having people step outside the echo chambers, come and hear debates about complex issues and about issues that are new, important, and right for our city. I hate to embarrass anybody, but there are 4 people in particular that helped make tonight's event a possibility, and I do want to call them out individually. If everyone can thank Tom Vander Rostein, Jill Bell, Kaylin Walls, and Mike Norman. Thank you for Thank you for our prospective board members who are stepping up tonight to be on the board ballot. And again, for those of you who are new to the Louisville Forum, this organization was founded in 1984 as a nonpartisan public issues group that hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville community. We may disagree on the course of action of these issues, but we agree that it is crucial to remove ourselves from our respective echo chambers to better understand our fellow citizens and perhaps learn something about our community. Sometimes it is through our debates and sometimes just questions from you in the audience who come to our events and ask your questions and start a really informative discussion. There was one that I was looking at in this past year. You guys recall in our August program, where's the next Humana coming from? That was a really big question about, is there going to be another great, Fortune 100 company that's in our midst that Louisville has on the cusp? We had some really great speakers. We had 2 great speakers that day, and someone asked one of our speakers to ask our speakers a simple question: what can be done about the Louisville airport? Jackson Andrews asked right back. He said, what is wrong with the Louisville airport? He went on to praise it and list all that is good with it, giving a very strong contrarian view about an essential infrastructure in our city. It was these kind of discussions that really make the Louisville Forum as great as it is. Sometimes we have great topics, sometimes we have great debates. We always try to, but sometimes it's just the great questions from the audience that elicit some of the best responses and best part of the whole day. So thank you all for your great questions and your great engagement. I'm just so proud to be part of this Louisville Forum. And I do want to point out, there's a lot of us in this room. Probably at every single table, there's people in this room who were not born or raised in Louisville, but called home and care deeply about the city and want to champion it and use it as a platform to make the world better. Our Fleur-de-Lis Award recipient tonight is a perfect example of this. He was born and raised in New York City. I stress city because I was born and raised in upstate New York, and there is a difference. In the late 1990s, I had the privilege of working for 2 years for our fellow United States Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan in his Washington office. Before he was a senator, Daniel Patrick Moynihan was a Harvard professor, the United States ambassador to the United Nations, and advisor to 4 United States presidents, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. Senator Moynihan said a lot of prophetic things. One admonishment he gave that always stuck with me is he said that matters are complex, and we cannot as a community get into a reflexive pattern of denying this. This is exactly why we have our forum, to enlighten ourselves about the complexity of issues and hear opposing viewpoints. I'm thankful for the unique role the Louisville Forum embraces in our community to welcome opposing views in a civic atmosphere. This is true civic engagement. Now, to what we're all here for tonight, the Fleur-de-Lis Award. After speaking of civic engagement since 1985, the Forum has presented the Fleur-de-Lis Award to local citizens who have made significant contributions to Louisville through their career in professional life and community service. Tonight is my distinct honor and really a thrill to announce and present this honor to one of our community's most benevolent individuals. Dr. Salvatore Bertolone earned his Doctor of Medicine from the University of Louisville in 1970. He completed residencies in pediatrics at the University of Louisville and Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center with the rank of major and a fellow in pediatric hematology oncology at the University of Colorado. And I'll say right away, some of these things that doctors say in medicine, I have hard times pronouncing, so bear with me while we're doing this. I once have had to read depositions of doctors, and they use words that are a little bit beyond me. So I'm going to continue. In 1980, Dr. Bertolone was appointed the Chief of Division of the Hematology Oncology in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Louisville. He held this position for over 30 years, during which he developed a cryopreservation lab. A placenta, did I say that right? Okay, close enough. All right, thanks. A placental stem cell harvesting program and a hospital unit primarily for hematology oncology patients. Suffering children, something we never like to hear about. Dr. Bertolone established one of the first pediatric hospice programs in the country, which was integrated into the Hospice of Louisville, where he served as president for 10 years. Stepping down as division chief, he was tasked with reorganizing the outpatient clinics and served as chief of clinical operations for 6 years. He was also deeply involved with the Louisville Dream Factory, an organization dedicated to granting dreams to chronically ill children and life-limiting or life-threatening conditions. Dr. Bertolone was a founding member of the Ronald McDonald House in 1984 and continues to serve on the board. The Ronald McDonald House has supported over 100,000 families, earning the nickname the House That Love Built. Dr. Bertolone has been honored with the Mark A. Lehman Spirit of Service Award and the National Jefferson Award for Public Service. I had the real pleasure of getting to know, having some great discussions with Dr. Bertolone before tonight. And one of the great things about the Ronald McDonald House was the way that, he's explained to me that there was houses where there was care that was getting at houses, and he said, listen, we can do it at the houses, we can do it at the Ronald McDonald House. Through the Humana Romanian program, he facilitated the training of true Romanian physicians in bone marrow transplants by bringing them to the United States and providing them with books and material for 3 months. They returned to Romania due to the 9/11 terrorist attacks and were the first team to perform a bone marrow transplant in Romania shortly after that. His patients affectionately call him Dr. Baloney. When I was looking into Dr. Baloney's career, I stumbled upon a quote he once gave. And he said, remember that there is art to medicine as well as science, and that warmth, sympathy, and understanding may outweigh the surgeon's knife or the chemist's drugs. Dr. Bertolone, the Louisville Forum thanks you for your many and meaningful contributions to our community and the world. Your talents, altruism, and tirelessness have made Louisville proud. On behalf of our membership in the board of the Louisville Forum, I am pleased to present you with the 2025 Fleur-de-Lis Award. Before we hear from Dr. Bertolone, as you can see from your programs, we have 3 speakers who will speak about their experience with the depth of Dr. Bertolone's contributions. Please first welcome Virginia Kelly Judd, the former executive director of the Humana Foundation. Just here. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, you got it, Virginia. Yeah.
I'm gonna put this right here.
That's perfect. Yeah, I'll sit down. Okay, thanks, Virginia.
All right. Well, when I was with Humana and the foundation, I made speeches, and that was okay, but I've been retired for 7 years, and I'm a little rusty, so hang in there with me. And I don't remember you ever having to hold the microphone. But anyway, good evening. I'm Virginia Kelly Judd. It is a real pleasure to be with you here tonight to honor my dear friend, Sal Bertolone. I met Sal and Kathy years ago in Romania. We were all working on a humanitarian health project together. And here, see? The first thing I noticed with Sal when I met him is, wow, he really knows how to grab a room's attention. And I'll give you an example. Sal and Kathy were giving a training in chemotherapy to a group of Romanian nurses. And at the time, nurses were so undervalued in Romania that they were only allowed to do very simple and menial tasks. And so Sal starts his presentation and he says, you have to understand, to the nurses, you have to understand that chemotherapy is too important and toxic, and therefore we don't allow doctors to administer this treatment in the U.S. At which time the whole room burst into laughter. You know, all these nurses are saying, what? This is crazy. And Sal went on to say, as highly valued members of the medical team, this is what we ask American nurses to do, and you can do it too. And at that point, all these smiles in the room, big smiles all around. And this was a prescient moment for the future, because today, Romanian nurses are valued, integral members of the medical teams, and thanks to Sal and Kathy. She had a little something to do with it too. So let me give you a little background to this story. It's November 1989, and the Berlin Wall has fallen, allowing the whole world to see the devastation of Eastern Europe and the depressed spirit of the people. Eastern Europe is free from communism, but the people are suffering greatly. 3 months later, it's February 1990. President George H.W. Bush, that's the first Bush, is reaching out to American business leaders to ask for their support for the Eastern European nations that are just coming out of 45 years of communism. One of those calls was to David A. Jones, chairman and CEO of Humana. And he called, President Bush called David Jones one day, and Mr. Jones took that call. And President Bush talked with David Jones about volunteerism and how it could be a powerful way to affect real change and to help these fragile populations in Eastern Europe. So Mr. Jones responded immediately and agreed to help. And he chose Romania because Romania had extreme poverty and severe health care needs, especially among the children. No medicines, broken down equipment, no access to Western health information for 45 years. Therefore, Romania needed everything. The president's call to David Jones eventually inspired a long-term humanitarian partnership involving hundreds of volunteer American medical professionals and Romanian nurses and doctors from hospitals and clinics throughout the country. So all the labor was free. Humana and its foundation managed and funded the other project expenses. The American and Romanian doctors and nurses worked together in Romania for 16 years. They implemented changes that would save the lives of critically ill children and adults. Training programs were held in Romania and in Louisville, too. Dr. Sal Bertolone signed up as a volunteer early in the project, and he generously gave his time and talent until the project ended in 2006. And I was Humana's Romania project director during those 16 years, and that's how I met Sal. Sal's work focused on the treatment of children with cancer. He established training programs in pediatric oncology and brought new diagnostic and treatment methodologies to many Romanian physicians and hospitals all over the country. He also took steps to create a national registry of available medicines. And as mentioned, there was a serious shortage of medications. And he initiated a region-based system whereby blood specimens could be transported for diagnostic studies, so patients could remain in their home city. This may have been the first time that Romanian oncology physicians had considered a national approach to addressing their patients' needs. Sal is a gifted and compassionate physician, researcher, and teacher. And I was very fortunate to witness the remarkable work of Sal and Kathy. Kathy is a national award-winning nurse practitioner who graciously led our project's nursing projects throughout the term of this initiative. One last story. During one of my visits to Romania, I observed Sal and Kathy perform a bone marrow aspirate and biopsy on a small Romanian child. As they were performing this very delicate procedure, all the while they were also demonstrating and teaching the nurses and doctors around the exam room table how to do this. And everyone was captivated. They were huddled around the table in anticipation, and you could feel the excitement in the room. When the procedure was over, everyone left the exam room, went outside, and hugged one another. And I knew at that moment that this was the power of love and cooperation. By joining hands with their Romanian partners, I'm getting choked up, Sal and Kathy were helping to save this young child before our eyes and also to make the world a better place. Tom, you just said that about Sal and Kathy, and that's so true. And for that, we will always be grateful. So, thank you. We're so sorry. Had to end with a bang.
Yes. Thank you, Virginia. The next speaker I'm going to introduce, right before I do that, I can't believe myself. I'm sitting at the table with Stacy Weeks, and I never thanked her for all of her contributions. The Louisville Forum would not run without her. Everyone, please thank Stacy Weeks. And forgive me. The next speaker, as I said earlier when I was talking to Dr. Stephen Kelsey, it was a pleasure to talk with him before tonight's program, or before when we were meeting earlier when he came in. But please welcome Dr. Kelsey. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, my friend.
All right. I didn't write anything down because what I want to say today, I had a privilege. Can y'all hear me pretty good?
Good. Maybe we'll just. Yeah.
We'll just talk real loud. Hold your applause. Didn't write anything down. Because as a young child, I always knew this day would come. May 30th, 1979. I just had my 14th birthday, May 10th. That weekend, Memorial Day weekend, my parents were gone. I was at the house, siblings outside playing. I don't want to get choked up with this. And I had masses growing in my throat. I couldn't breathe. So I broke out the window to try to get some air. And my brother saw me break the window, so he ran from our home about 15 blocks to Newburgh Park to find our parents in the park watching different baseball games. When he found my mother, he said, "Steve, you can't breathe." The last thing I remember was passing out. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. I went from 130 pounds to 98 pounds within a 24, 72-hour period. I didn't know what was happening. They told me that I could have died. Come to find out I had leukemia, never heard of it. And I woke up, my arm was burned 3rd degree. The big Christian medicine leaked out of my tissue and burned my arm 3rd degree. So not only did I have to go to the doctor to get bone marrow, spinal taps, I had to go to the burn unit. And I'm 14 years old. And I said, God, what in the world did I do to have to go through something like this? Every day, I wish I was dead. Because the excruciating pain of having a bone marrow, spinal tap, being Christian, taking medicine at home, and I made a plan with God. I said, if you are who you say you are, if you are a healer like you said you are, then I need you to heal me. And one of the worst things that was happening, the people that was diagnosed with me, all of a sudden, they were not around anymore. So I said, okay, God, if that's my assignment, let's go ahead and do it now. I cannot tell you all the times I contemplated suicide. Because I hated the spinal taps, the bone marrows, and people telling me that it's going to be all right. The radiation, the chemotherapy, I was sick every day. I contemplated suicide sometimes. And on one particular day, I saw my stepfather's gun sitting there. I said, God, if I'm going to die, I'm going to get this over with. And I heard God say, you told me to heal you. He said, I need you to trust me. So I had medication I had to take at home. I said, God, I'm going to put you to the test. I went to the clinic and had my spinal tap, my bone marrows. But when I went home, I never took the medicine. I never took it. And I did not know that Dr. Bertolone knew I wouldn't take the medicine. I thought I was out tricking him. And Catherine would come in and pet me and say, Steve, are you doing okay? Of course. Are you taking your medicine? Yeah.
We knew you were.
But for some reason, instead of getting worse, I got better. I had, and I've always had, ridiculous faith. So that unprecedented incident that happened in 1979, after my 14th birthday, I ended up going to college, playing college basketball with a scholarship. I boxed the Golden Gloves. I retired from the police department, and I've been able to earn 3 doctoral degrees. All of my life, I said, Lord, please give me a platform where I could tell the world about Dr. Bertolone and, at the time, Kathy Michaels. I was in love with Kathy. She was my nurse. I wouldn't let nobody give me my medicine, my shots, but her. On one particular day, I was at the clinic, and Kathy said, Steve, I'm being busy for a minute. So she went to somebody else's room the next door, and she took so long. Because of the love I had for her, I got on the bus and went back home, didn't have my treatment that day, because I was not going to let anybody touch me.
And I was mad at you.
I was not going to let anybody touch me. Went home, Mom said, what you doing here? And my stepfather was in the waiting room, but I went out the back door, downstairs, and I caught the bus home. But I'm saying this, I honor you. I owe you my life.
God.
The night I was in the hospital, in the emergency room, somebody called you to tell you that a young boy downstairs needs you. And I appreciate you. You've always been the father that I never had, and I've told you this all the time. I admire you. To hear that you are a trendsetter. And one of the reasons I started going into doctoral work, because I saw the footprints that you left in the sand for me. Because the pain, knowing that everybody that was diagnosed with me was passing away. And I knew my time was next. And I said, God, if you give me enough strength to let me make it, and if I make it every May 10th, I always get scared. Because I know what happened in the month of May 1979. So if it, by God's grace, this May 10th, I will be turning 60 years old. And I'm grateful. I tell everybody, why do you keep saying your age? Because there was a time I didn't know I would be here. And I want to publicly thank my wife. 30 years of marriage. I would not have been able to accomplish what I've accomplished without her being by my side. Yes, we bought a house, but she made the house a home. And one particular time I had surgery, radiation throughout my body, Dr. Bertolone said, you might not be able to have kids, but to God be the glory. I have 3 beautiful children and a grandbaby. Another grandbaby. So I salute both of you. You guys are phenomenal. Thank you for being at my wedding, being at every special occasion in my life. And I know God used you to help somebody like me. But I had what they call survivor's guilt. I'm a psychologist. Anybody understand survivor's guilt? Why me? Why did I survive? I did nothing different. Emily, Billy. I was not better than them. But they didn't make it. And that's what survivors do. And I said, God, I'm going to use my life to incorporate all of their life in me. So everyone that was diagnosed with me in 1979, I'm living for all of us. So when you see me, you see Steve, and when Steve had his leg amputated in the wheelchair, I thank you. And I'm sorry that's all we have to give you.
No, you standing there is a gift.
And I always say in church after I finish my sermon, may God bless you, may God keep you, and have a smile upon you. This is my prayer.
Thank you, Dr. Kelsey. Thank you very much. Dr. Allgeier.
I don't even want to go. Please sit.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome, Dr. Allgeier. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, I went ahead and brought this up because I know I'll probably be crying here in a second. I was already crying. No eye contact, Dr. B, if you don't mind. So I did write a few things down. So Dr. B always asked me to do this, and I thought it was funny when I got the email that said you have 5 minutes. And so I said, he knows I like to talk, so that'll be a challenge for me to get. How about I just forget this too? I have a pretty big voice until I start to cry. But the other thing is that he also knows I am the world's biggest softie, so you just destroyed me sitting there. That was wonderful, because so many of the things you hit on, it's right where it is. But I'm like that pro athlete, right, that just won that big event, and the interviewers like trying to get him to cry. Well, that's me, and I'm easy. I'm an easy target. So thank you, Dr. B. I also requested to go before Dr. Kelsey for that very reason, but that's okay. So we'll press on. And so, my story with Dr. B started in August. So actually it was 11 days before my 13th birthday. We were talking about that, a kind of kindred spirit. So that was my birthday present on August 6th. I was actually diagnosed with an adult type of leukemia, just to be a little bit different. And so that's kind of where our journey started. So I was already stubborn from the very get-go. And so it was one of those things that, Dr. Stephen just hit it and summed it all up. Everything's there. The thoughts of why me, the survivor's guilt, because I also had lots of, classmates, I would call them, who were going through this with me, who had a better course. They had the better leukemia, if you will, than what I had. I think mine in 87 had a 40% 5-year survival. Now that's not, I was going to say, and that was, so y'all may have fibbed to me then. But that wasn't a cure. That was just your heart would be beating in 5 years. So it was pretty daunting. Again, I don't like odds, so I pressed on, and with the guidance of Dr. Bertolone, by the grace of God, I'm standing here. And I could go through the litany of the treatments that I had with him, but I thought I would take kind of a different bend. I'm a pediatrician. Thanks to Dr. Bertolone, that was one of the driving forces for that. But I think it's unique in that I have kind of a different story. Well, actually, I have a lot of stories with Dr. Bertolone, most of which I can't share here. But there was one in particular that was life-changing. He probably won't even remember it because it was just one of those normal conversations. I also had a life-changing experience trying to get live koi fish from the airport with you before they closed. That was a different life-altering experience. But this was, we would have rounds, and so, in medicine we like to round, right? So you pre-round in the morning with the residents from the med student, then the resident pre-rounds with the fellow, and then the fellow rounds with the attending. And then every once in a while, because that's not enough rounding, we bring the whole group together in the conference room to sit around and go, well, what do you think? Well, what do you think? What do you think? And so we had everyone in there. We had the MDs, we had nurses, we had social workers, we had child life. If you can imagine, everyone was in the room. And they were talking, I swear I'll get loose. We were talking about a little girl. I'm not going to break HIPAA. I won't mention a name. But we were talking about summer camp. One sec. And to a kid with cancer, it's a big deal. You get to be around other people, look like you, act like you, go through the same things. And I remember the child life specialist and several of the other members talking, saying, all she wants to do is go to camp. But they were going to have to alter her treatment course to do that. And I remember Dr. B sitting there and saying, and I'm paraphrasing, but I don't really care about this summer camp. What I care about is that she can go to as many summer camps as she wants in the future. So it wasn't just about the now, it was about the then. And so, kind of like for me and for Stephen, he had a plan, and he was going to get us to that plan. I remember when I was going through chemo, I was randomized to come off of treatment halfway through. They said, he's done really well. We don't really have that many kids who have AML. Let's see what he does. Dr. B didn't like that idea because I had done a 180. I was happy I was going to be a 13-year. I was heading to business school, to law school, and I did a complete 180 and said, no, I'm going to do medicine. He knew that. So he said, you know what? Let's design our own treatment plan. I say we because I sat in the room as we discussed it, as if I had any. I was like, yeah, I think ARC would be great at that. No, I do not want any more bone marrows. Okay, we don't have to do bone marrows. What about spinal taps? I can give you a spinal tap every 2 months, but that's it. And so we were like having a negotiation, but he was crafting this master plan, and I'm standing here because of that. I also had a fungal pneumonia at that time. Again, stubborn me, didn't know I was supposed to die. Even when the priest came in and gave me last rites, you would think that would have clued me in, but I did not realize it. I thought, cool, I've got one more sacrament on my sister. Sadly, that was actually my thought. And so, again, surgeons wanted to come in and take half of the lung and said, your treatment's not working. Dr. Rabelais and Dr. Bertolone came in and said, he's probably going to want the other half of that lung at some point in his life. Let's give it a little bit longer. By the grace of God, the fungal ball started to shrink and I was able to resume my chemo. But those are just two instances where he was looking at the now, he was factoring in clinical decisions while thinking about the then. Because of that, I stand here with 2 full lungs, gray hair, which I love. Also, I proudly declare, so those of you trying to do math, I'm 50. And so I love it. I proudly talk about it. And people talk about, you can put a little something to cover your eyes. I love my gray hair. Number one, I have hair, which is awesome because for years I didn't due to chemo. And now it's gray, which is even better. And it's a testament to the work that Dr. Bertolone did because he was thinking about the then, as I like to say. And so as a pediatrician, I try to emulate that in my practice, right? So as I'm taking care of newborns and I'm taking care of teenagers, even the 18 and 20-year-olds that you want to just strangle them, I think about the then. So I know the things I have to tell the parents to do. I know what I have to have the children do to get them to the then. Because the now will take care of itself. I try to keep my mind a little bit forward, and I learned that from him. I can't make eye contact with him right now. But it's all because of Dr. Bertolone that I get to stand up here, sing his praises, and I can assure you, he hates this. Absolutely hates this. But it's nice because I get to sing his praises to a group that may not know how special he really is and how deserving he is of this award and any other award you can come up with. I'm a big fan of his work. So, and so, you know, Dr. B always talks about, you know, he has so many children. He has so many grandchildren now from former patients. I kind of view that the same way in my practice. I always joke with my wife, I said, I have 4,000 children. I only have to pay for college for 2, thank God. But that's all because of him, because of the way he took us under his wing as family, never felt like a patient. Every patient will tell you, who's Dr. B's favorite patient? I am. You are, because he made us all feel so special. Just like any good parent does to their child, if they ask, who's your favorite? Well, of course it's you, right? And that's the kind of special thing that he can do, and he doesn't even realize he's doing it. So I try to emulate that in my practice. It's an honor to be able to stand up here. I get to call you a bunch of things now. So I get to call you my doctor, my mentor, my colleague, but most importantly, family. Thank you all.
Well, one more thank you to Virginia, Stephen, and Al. Thank you, 3. Thank you. I'm sitting at the table with Jill Bell, and she warned all of us ahead of time that we better bring tissues with us when we come tonight. So, let's getting right to the heart of this, please. Well, everyone, Dr. Bertolone, if you would, thank you.
Thank you. I am embarrassed. I thank you all very much for coming. And I'm assuming that half of what they said was true, but I think I would really like, you've heard a little bit about what I did. Okay, great. But I would like to talk tonight about how I got here. I was born in a three-dimensional or a three-dimensional family, if you will. My grandparents lived with us. They spoke Italian when they didn't want us to know what was going on. My mom and dad, my mom was the authoritative person on a day-to-day basis, but when dad raised his voice, you knew you were in trouble. And my sibs. Dad said, I'll pay your tuition, but the rest is yours. And so all 3 of his children went to get their masters from the University of Hard Knocks. We learned very quickly to learn the value of money and how to spend it wisely. And we learned about time management. And all of those, I think, were all very good, and what we did as children, we emulated what we didn't know what we were learning, I was the oldest. At 14, and I will tell you now, I was not a little bit of a smartass. At 14, my dad, in order to keep me straight, said, "You're getting a job this summer." And so my response to him was real obvious. I said, "Oh, yeah, right, Dad. I'm 14. You need working papers. How am I going to get a job?" Well, 2 weeks later, I had the worst job you can get in a restaurant. What is it? Washing dishes. So I was washing dishes in a restaurant all that summer at the Lipton Tea restaurant in an amusement park like we have up in Cincinnati. Okay, it was like that. It had plenty of restaurants and all that stuff. Okay, great. From there, I went to become a manager, and then by the time I was 20, I was managing and running 3 restaurants. I was supervisor of 3 places in the park. My mom comes home one day and she says, "You know, I work with so-and-so, and her son says you're crazy." Yeah, I was crazed. I was crazed. I learned a lot about people and how they maneuver you. I learned how you work hard and sometimes you don't get your reward. And I also learned from Mr. Millman, the vice president of the corporation. I didn't know anything about HR or work rules. I had no idea. But I did know that everybody on our team came in many times on their own time to clean and make sure we had the best place. The net result was we had won 2 awards in a row, and we're looking for the 3rd award as having the best restaurant in the amusement place. And, here's this kid who comes, tells his mom, "Dad, this guy I work for is nuts. He's crazy." And my mom was looking at me like, "What the hell are you doing?" I was paying attention to detail. I learned that early on, I think when I was in the 3rd grade, because the teacher there told me probably in September, early on, so I must have been a really interesting kid, that I should have my mother call her. Well, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, right, my mother's going to call her? If I tell my mother this, I'm going to get in trouble. So I didn't tell her. September, October, November, December. Oh, the Christmas party, the Christmas show. Mom, you don't have to go. Oh, yeah, we have to go, Well, that was it. The jig was up, She said, the first thing the teacher says, "So you're Mrs. Bertolone." And, that was a cheap lesson, I guess, Never tell a lie or refuse to tell the truth. It served me well. Okay, so we go from there, and then I learned you pay attention to little things, and that helped me as a physician, giving chemotherapy and looking at every little single thing. Okay, we're doing that, and what did Mr. Millman teach me? He, for the 3rd year, he was guaranteed that he was going to get us on something. He had nothing, so he rolls up his pants legs, both pant legs on his suit. And I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing? Goes in the back, climbs into the dumpster, looking for something that we had thrown away or so that he could nail us on. He couldn't find anything, so we won it 3 years in a row. But a lesson learned. I'm like, pay attention to little things and details. Okay, so go on to the Jesuit institution, 8 years totally, 4 high school, 3 college at the University of Fordham University and Fordham Prep. Took 4 years of Latin, 3 years of Greek, 2 years of French in high school, and I still graduated in 4 years. Yeah, because some people say, oh, yeah, well, how long did it take you to graduate, you know? So I go up to college, pre-med, do that. All right, want to be a doctor. I had laid in bed for 3 days while I was in grammar school with a bellyache. And my mother thought I had the regular whatever, you know. Finally, she says, no, we probably ought to take him to a doc. Well, they rushed me to the hospital from there, and they operate, and I have appendicitis. All right, I'm on an adult ward now because they had no room on the little kids ward. No problem. I'm there. I wasn't a complainer. You know, okay, I got appendicitis. Yeah, they took it out. My dad comes to visit me on a Sunday, and he says he literally could watch the blood drain out of my face and body. Starts going crazy and getting everybody started and going. They take me back to the operating room and they open me up, and what comes out? Nothing but pus. So I developed gram-negative sepsis, which back then was a pretty bad deal, and many times you didn't make it. So I learned from that once again. You know, pay attention to detail. I made it, obviously. So med school, I was there. The university, I decided on the University of Louisville School of Medicine. At then, they were not a state school, and so they could accept anybody they wanted. And so 30% of my class, the class I was in, was from out of state, mainly from the Northeast and California. And my freshman year, my roommate was from Brown University, and the fellow next door was from Columbia University. During med school, I had 3 jobs. I was a super for the apartment complex that we were in. It was my job to take care of everything, or at least not fix it, but at least get it done. I got free rent. I was like, okay. I was a diener, which meant I assisted in autopsies on dead bodies. And I was also what they called a chief of the commandos. We had medical students, 3rd and 4th year, that would work in the emergency room. And we did sewing and little stuff like that. And some of my classmates say, you know, wow, you know, you taught me how to do a running base stitch, and you taught me how to do this. And I was like, my dad was a tailor. He was a teacher. He taught high school, and he taught at night at the Fashion Institute of Technology. So, you know, I was like, sure, I can do, you know. I don't tell my wife that, though, you know, because I'm not sewing anything. So we got through that. My next door neighbor, Jim George, the fellow from Columbia, he finished his medical school here and had to stay 1 year. And while he did his first year of residency, he finished his JD degree. So he got 2 degrees, a medical degree and a doctorate of jurisprudence. Okay? Now, think about that. That's something else. But in his mind, he was like, I want to be president of the senior class. And when we graduated, he was president of the senior class. He laid it out for 4 years, and some idiot like Bertolone wound up as vice president. It is what it is. So now I have my life set up. I'm going to do 3 years of pediatrics, because you needed 3 years, and a shout out to Don Kometz, who went on to become the dean of the medical school and vice president for health affairs. And he's a pathologist, the vice president of pediatrics. And his style was great. It was like 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. And I like that. I like that kind of order. And I said, you know, I want to be a pediatric hematologist. So I'll do 3 years of pediatrics and 3 years of hem-onc. Okay, that's my game plan. Somewhere along the line, I learned, and I think I hope my sons here learn the same thing, give people the opportunity to say no. You lose nothing when you shoot high. You have nothing to lose because you don't have it. Give people the opportunity to say no. And so everywhere I went, I always tried to push the envelope a little bit. Now it's interesting how I wound up in Denver to begin with. I'm midway through the first year of my internship, and we're now in, let's see, I graduated in 70, so this is 71, February 71. I said to my 4 other interns, hey guys, the Vietnam is hot and heavy. We need to join the National Guard in Kentucky. And turn around, February of 72, the 4 of them got in. 1 didn't. Guess who? Yeah, I did not get in. Where's my letter? They got it in February. I got nothing. I'm like, okay, what's going to happen now? Well, they only got into the National Guard. I got a letter from Tricky Dicky. Welcome. We want you. Show up July 1 at Whitehall in New York, and you are mine. Okay. I wasn't planning on that. So here we are, and I'll never forget it. It's the Derby I did not go to. It was May 1st of 72, which came on a Tuesday. A Saturday. And I'm like, I better not go to the Derby in field because I will do things that I will get in trouble for. So I didn't go. I said no to myself. Okay, so as it turned out, there was a fellow by the name of Ronnie Joe Sayers that I had become close to in med school. He was a wrestler at West Point. He graduated, and he went to the Armed Forces of Institute of Pathology in Washington, D.C. Okay, so I called Joe up and I said, Joe, how does the Army work? What do I have to do? What do you want? And I said, I want to be a pediatrician and a hematologist. He said, well, why don't you come up here and talk to one of these colonels, and I'll see if I can get you an hour meeting with him. Once again, it's like, give somebody an opportunity to say no, right? So I go up there, knowing nothing, knowing anything. No strings are pulled. No money goes under the table. And I meet with him for 4 hours. And he says, we're starting a pediatric hematology oncology program right here. And you'll be down at Bethesda and the NIH between the 2 of them. And we want to do this. I'm like, whoa, how about that? How could I be so lucky? Except the Navy owned me at that time because they had put me on inactive reserve. So I had to go down to the Navy and say, what are you going to do with me? And they said, who the hell are you? I said, well, you own me until July of the next year, but I have a deferment for a year. And he says, we don't know where we'll put you. Okay. So I go back thinking, that's it. I go back and talk to the Army and say, I'm in the Navy in active reserve, but they'll let me out if you say you'll take me. And he says, yeah, we'll take you. So go back to the Navy. The Navy says, it's not that easy. We want to see the written stuff here before we'll let you out. Long story short, everything worked out. Now I'm in the Army. And I'm thinking, all right, how great that is. And all this time I'm thinking, this is too good to be true. Well, it was. A shout out to a Colonel Plunkett who is in Denver. He's a full colonel. The guy that wanted me was only a lieutenant colonel. And it so happens that Colonel Plunkett is a pediatrician who specialized in hematology oncology and who was a senior member and was now the consultant to the Surgeon General in all things pediatrics. And he didn't want to leave Denver, but he had this other job. And he's like, and so he calls, does anybody remember Billy Andrews? Billy Andrews was the chief of pediatrics for decades. It turned out that Andrews and Plunkett knew each other. Now, once again, I get this impression that something's going on that I have no control over, but boy, somebody's looking after me. He talks to Andrews and says, yeah, this guy is pretty good. Plunkett has my orders changed that I go to Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center in Denver. All right, so I need 3 years of pediatrics, I need 3 years of hemonc, and now I owe the Army 2 years. Okay? Well, once again, somebody is doing something up there because I went in 72 and I got discharged in 76, and it was honorable. And Dan was very, very, he was a colonel, but he had a way about him, and he knew that I knew nothing about the military. I didn't even go to basic training. I didn't even know how to put a uniform on. And I used to be downtown a lot, and I had 2 episodes of thinking outside of the box. One was a patient who was terminal, he had ALL, and there was no way, bone marrow transplant hadn't even been, a thing you could do in the early 70s. And so this kiddo had come up with his dad from Fort Huachuca, and he's in Denver. And I need to get him from Fort Huachuca back to Fort Huachuca from Denver. Now, the Army is great. I've been on some of their transports. They can take that fighting man or woman and bring them anywhere and get anything done like that. But ask the military to take somebody from here to here. They have to go here first, and then sometimes there, and then sometimes there, and maybe 4 or 5 days later they get where they want to go. And I'm like, I can't have this kid who's susceptible to infections and everything else going over Guard Green Acre before he gets home. And why should he have to die in Denver? And I really struggled with this for about 2 or 3 weeks, probably 2 weeks. And then it dawned on me that Wright-Patterson is where they make all the decisions on how the planes take off and where they go and what happens. So one day I call Wright-Pat and I say, hi, this is Major Bertolone, because the Army pays attention to your rank. And said, I've got this kid and I need to get him from Denver to Fort Huachuca without going to Fort Sam and every place else around. Is it possible that this can be done? And I said, of course it can. And they said, okay, how do I do it? They said, you just have him at the base airfield on Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock. All right, right? No. It happens. He takes off, and I think I did a good thing. Then Colonel Plunkett calls. And I knew I was in trouble. He said, Bertolone, Major Bertolone, what did you do? And I'm like, I don't know, sir. Give me a hint. And he says, are you in charge of transportation? I said, I know what you're talking about. Now, let me tell you my side of the story. And he said, let's make sure that you never, ever are in charge of transportation anymore. I said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. That was that. Then there was the issue of they had this, Denver was a place where a lot of military retired. It's a great place to live, whether it's summer, winter, fall. My wife doesn't like it in the winter, but I keep telling her it's warmer sometimes in Denver than it is here in the winter. But she doesn't believe me. I would never lie. I might forget things, but, and so we have to deal with the issue of, there was this rule that said you could only have 2 bone marrows done a day at this whole hospital. Now, Fitzsimmons had a lot of retired Gomers, if you would, and they tend to get more cancer than young kids. And I never thought much about it. I didn't have a problem, until the time when I said, I need a bone marrow for this kid because I think he's relapsed. And they said, well, our schedule's all filled up for 2 weeks. I said, no. I need this. I can't wait 2 weeks. They said, well, you know the rules. I didn't know the rules. They had the rules. I didn't know the rules till they told me. I thought, okay, then I learned about something called a non-availability statement. The non-availability statement said basically that what you wanted was not available. And I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I thought, ha. So one day I went into the colonel of pathology's office, and I even said to them, I said, look, I'll do the bone marrow, I'll stain the bone marrow, I'll read the bone marrow. Why can't I have a bone marrow? They said, well, we might lose a site, we might lose train of where the specimen went and not know about it. I said, come on, give me a break. He didn't. Okay, I didn't feel like I owed him anything. Went in there, he signed it. I had told the kid's mother, I said, tomorrow, I want you down at Children's Hospital. You go down there at 11:30, I'll call, and at 12:05, I will be there to do your bone marrow. So, Army shuts down from 12 to 1. That's it. And if you ever want to attack the United States, do it at about 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. But, okay, so I got in the car, went down to Children's Hospital, did the bone marrow, came back, looked at it. Yeah, it was positive he had relapsed, so I started him on therapy. I don't think anything more about it. About 3 months, 4 months later, I get a phone call from Colonel Plunkett. He never held it against me. He never yelled. I mean, he knew I had no idea of how the system works, nor did I want to know. And he says, Major Bertolone, what did you do? And I'm like, I don't know, sir. Tell me. He says, you got a non-availability statement and the bill went to the general? I said, sir, my name is not on that piece of paper. Talk to the colonel. In pathology, his name is on the paper. Colonel Plunkett calls back about 3 or 4 days later, and he says, Major Bertolone, pathology says you can have a bone marrow whenever you want it. Oh boy, things work well. I come back now, shout out to, once again, Dr. Kometz. He hires me as the junior person in the division. Now this is 76. They have their first 76. I'm getting discharged. And they gave me a medal. The Army Commendation Medal. I'm serious. All of my, everybody's like, how the hell did you get a medal? I said, I don't know, but I got it, for setting up ways by which we could transport kids back and whatnot, and so and so. So anyway, I got the Army Commendation Medal. But I didn't decide to stay in. It wouldn't change my mind. All right, so now I'm starting as the lowest of the low, an assistant professor in the Department of Pediatrics. Okay. First thing, I was there, I guess it was my first month on rotation, and these kids were all over the place. I mean, they didn't even have, at that point, a unit where people knew what they were doing, just on kids with cancer. That's the way the world was back then. And I was like, no. So I had a patient on 4C, 4A, 4B. I go to 4C, and I'm like, looking at the chart, looking at this, and I'm like, somebody gave a drug that you should really only give early in the morning, but not late in the afternoon at night, because it could hurt your bladder. And I'm there, and I am angry as all get out. My fuse is pretty hot. Who's the person who did this? And I won't tell you who it was. So we go through that, and got the whole thing changed around so most of the patients did go to a unit where people knew what they were doing and did it on a regular basis. That's just common sense, and that's what most hospitals do today, obviously. We take it for granted. Okay. When I graduated from medical school, they have this very elite thing that they have. They call it the AOA, the really cream intelligentsia of the group, the top 5 or 10%. I did not graduate with that. Probably in the top quarter, but not that. So now I'm working my way through, and they have this first exam for see if you're certified in pediatric hematology oncology, which means all the people who were doing it had to take the first exam. So now all the youngins like me at the time, we have to take an exam that's basically against us because these people have been doing it for 10 years. And I finished in 76, took the exam in 76. And I can tell you, when I got ready for this, I looked at my diploma from the American Academy of PT/Onc, and my certificate was the 216th one given, and I ranked in the 77th percentile of all the people who took it. So, by gosh, I didn't get to be AOA, but I was going to be good here, and I was. Show me how to play the game, and I'll beat you at it. Great, we're getting through that. I look back at, as we went through this, about 1982, two special things happened in my life. Two shout-outs. One to Tina Halbeck. I had decided that it was time for me to do bone marrow transplants in Louisville. I didn't rotate on the transplant program in any place, but I decided that we needed to do it. So I went to Chicago, spent a week there, studied under a Roger Hertzik, who some of you may know or remember the name. He went on to become pretty good and darn good nationally, and wound up in Louisville as the head of their adult program for decades. One of the things you needed to do was freeze cells and freeze bone marrows. Now, when you freeze a ice cube, it expands. Well, we're looking at tiny little cells now that we want to freeze that have a tiny little membrane, and it's a very delicate procedure. And we were fortunate enough to have Tina in the lab, and I said to Tina, I want to do bone marrow transplants. Let's go look and see how we can do that. So like I said, I went up to Cleveland, sent Tina up there. We couldn't have done it without her. We could not have done it without her. She was very precise, very accurate, and I will say you have to be anally retentive to do this kind of thing, because there's no substitute for getting it 98% right. And by God, she then said, I want to I think it was her. I don't think it was me at the time, and you can correct me. But she said, well, I'd like to go out to Seattle and spend time out there. And I said, go ahead and do it. But I don't think it was my first idea. I think it was yours. And so she went out to Seattle where all the first transplants were being done in this country. And so out she went. We got a freeze machine from London, England. And we started learning how to freeze cells. I don't know how to do it, but I know how to use it. Without her, we couldn't have done it. Same time, 82, I couldn't believe it. I was going through administrative individuals in our division like water in a sieve. I mean, they didn't stay very long, and I had a terrible rotation, a terrible reputation. There's no question about it. I was just hell on wheels. And then this woman of prize, like that lady over there who, I forget her name, Sally Feeney. She was in the dental school at the time and was told by many people, you don't want to work for him. And the fool came. Without her, I couldn't have done half the things I did. She kept me sane. When I gave out crazy memos, she held them. She sent out the ones that had to go and protected me from myself. And I probably would not have been able to do half the stuff I did without her calming influence. She knew when to hold them, she knew when to fold them, she knew when to send them, and she kept me sane. You sure you want to do this? Long story short, we wound up working together for 30 years. She became my work wife. I spent more time at work than I did at home. That brings us through 82. Then we have Jeff and Hunt Rounceville. Christine is diagnosed with neuroblastoma, and this is well known. They've made this well known, and they saw how people were sleeping in hallways with their children, that we needed a place from home. Oh, before that though, in '79, I had come back from two very traumatic experiences when I was in Denver, and a shout out to Mary Jo Cleveland. She was the nurse in charge of the oncology unit there, and she said, Dr. Bertolone, Major Bertolone, whatever you are, we're going to do a home visit on a dying patient. I'd never done one of those before. I was like, okay, sure. We went out there. It was traumatic, no question about it. And but she had different things up her mind. So we get over that, and then 2 weeks later, the child passes. And she said, well, we're going to go back out to see Michael. I think, okay, we went to see him, no big deal. I go back out to see him. He has passed. Now, the rest of this, I'm not sure how it happened. Somewhere along the line, she says now, the family doesn't have any money, and the pathologist wants to do an autopsy, and they've agreed to the autopsy. But they're going to have to call an ambulance, and it's going to cost them money, and we don't know how we're going to do that. Okay. What do I have to do with it? Well, how about if we carry Michael back in your back seat? And I'm like, what? And I said, what happens if we get stopped? Said, oh, he's been certified already. He's died. I said, really? We're going to do this? And he said, this is what the family needs. If you don't want to do it, we won't do it. All right, put the burden on me. All right, so we did it. That was, it was sort of like When people need something, they need it. Do it, provided it's within the law. So we did it. And so I was comfortable in 79. We had, as you say, your patients that you were with, the incidence of having central nervous system disease, in other words, the leukemia that was in your bone marrow was in remission, but now it was in your head. The incidence of that was 2.5% a month. It was happening when these kids were 2 years of age, or in remission 2 years of age. So if you think about it, in 4 years, you had a 50% chance of having disease in your head. A lot of patients died, and it was my COVID, basically. I mean, a lot of children were dying. And, okay, when you have a problem, what do you do that really you can't control it? You do something to at least modify it, and that's what I did. I developed the first pediatric hospice, or at least I think this was going on around the country, but we were able to develop it into the hospice of Louisville. So we didn't have to start all over. And then from 79 to 85, I did that, and then, no act of kindness goes unpunished. So then hospice decided that I should be their CEO. So I took that on for 5 years. And then nobody else wanted it, so I had it for another 5 years. During that 10-year period, we developed it into one of the 3 to 5 top hospices in the country, right here in Louisville. Part of the reason, though, was we were already then a certificate of need thing, so that a lot of the other places couldn't break it off. But while there, we did 2 things that were special. One was we advertised on television, Hospice of Louisville. They had never thought about doing it. And the other thing was back to, the hard knocks that I learned from my MBA. And I said to hospice, I want to report on what everything we do costs. And they're like, well, we're hospice. I said, I don't care, you're hospice. What are you? And they're like, no. Well, I said, no, this is what I want. And that's what we got. And we now then knew a way to interest anyone who was interested in doing something that we did at hospice or donating it to. We knew that this program that we had a deficit of this, or this program had a deficit of this, so we knew where we could channel people if they had no particular cause or whatever they wanted within hospice. And so we became very successful, I guess is the right word, of helping people. That was hospice. Okay, now Don Kometz becomes the dean of the medical school in 80, so therefore, by default, I become chief of the division. I could do whatever I wanted now. And we did. We grew. And during that time period, I went over this with my wife. I had 7 people that we hired over the years who then were obviously vetted by my wife of work also, and she made good choices. 7 of these went on to become chiefs of other divisions around the country. Then we have, in early 78, I guess, Don Kometz says, well, you knew a little bit about Ronald McDonald houses. Why don't you go to Chicago and see, what's going on? Well, I came back. I went to Chicago, but in 79, there were 10. I looked it up. I think there were 10 Ronald McDonald houses. They had started in Philadelphia, a home away from home for kids and their parents who could stay close to therapy. Philadelphia it's easy to move there. But what do you do when you have an agrarian state with big distances where you take people in, but you have a small medical center. You're not like Philadelphia. And I went up there and I said, you know, do I need a Ronald McDonald House? Yes, but no. And they thought, who's this hick from Kentucky? What's he talking about? Yes, but no. And I said, you know, I need a place where I can take my children with cancer and have them there in the house. I said, but what about the preemies, and what about the cardiac kids, and what about the pulmonary kids, and what about these kids that come long distances? And the Ronald McDonald House, being a house only for children with cancer, morphed into a house for everybody. And now I would say probably at least 60 to 70% of any Ronald McDonald House is occupied by mainly parents and families of preemies. So we did that, and then commits, you know, I go back and say, yeah, we could do this, and da-da-da, and then there were powers that be in the community, two different organizations that just was like, this is not the right time, this is not the right time, this is not the right time. So they got me all excited, and then they say, this is not the right time. Well, they weren't Plunkett. Lo and behold, Jeff and Hunt Rounsaville and Christine, now Mueller, is born with neuroblastoma. And there was no stopping them. They could stop me because they still controlled me, but they couldn't control them. They were going for it, and I was going with them. The Younger Women's Club was involved. The whole community was involved. But the Elfin Society was also involved, and they're a group of retired engineers and the like from GE back then. And we opened it in, we put it together. I think we broke ground in September the 12th of 83 and opened the doors of September 14th of 84. We would go out into the community, and I would take pictures of black, have them developed, and we'd go around with, you know, those little carousel things and get that done. And I made a presentation to the Elfin Society, and they signed up. And then only after the house had been built, about 5 years later, they said, you know, Dr. Bertolone, you gave a great presentation, but we knew you didn't know what the hell was involved. You didn't know how much had to be done, but you were so enthusiastic. We said, hey, let's try it. And the community, once again, rose up and did it. The hospice, the community rose up and did it. The good people in this room rose up and did it. I was just lucky enough to be there at the time. Then we have the Humana thing. Well, we went over, it was 1989 when I got a letter from the AOA Society who said, you are hereby inducted into our hoitsy-toitsy place. And so what a better time than to say to that woman who gave the chemotherapy when it was supposed, the day was supposed to be given, but nobody told her that you shouldn't do it late in the afternoon or at night. So I said, would you marry me? And she said yes. And she's my wife right there, who actually spent more time teaching the nurses in Romania than probably anybody else. When we got to Romania, we were the second group. Kathy and I went with George Rogers, the chief, and Nancy Mattiunas, who was a pharmacist. And I was an early bird, so I got up at 4 a.m. to light the hot water heater so that we could all take showers. And because in Romania, in Bucharest in particular, all the water was shut off to the houses, and it all went to industry. Romania at that time suffered terribly mentally from the results of being under the thumb of the communists. Two little stories and then I'll stop. Oh wow, we're late. I'm sorry about that. We would go there and they had wards where you'd have 25 children in the dark. You had one light bulb. You screwed it in. I stood on it. I got to stand on the chair because I was the most limber. So I stand on the chair, light the light bulb in. We made our rounds, 8 o'clock at night. When we were finished, they said, well, take it down. I said, well, I need something. My hot bed burned my hands. So you got to take it down. Left the room, not one peep in those children. That's how programmed they were. The adults were just as programmed. I once said to a Romanian chief of a hospital, don't send your driver out to get me. You know, we can get there. After the third time, he says, stop saying that. I'm coming. And he said, you don't understand. I said, no, I don't. You know, just send somebody. He says, if the driver doesn't feel like working that day, they don't have to work. We were about 5 kilometers from the Russian border. We're driving up there to Baia, and I feel this. There's something different up here. And I said to our person who guided us, I said, Tutor. I said, Tutor, what's going on in the city? He said, what are you talking about? I said, something's happening here. I can feel it. And he said, nothing. He wouldn't tell me. We leave there and he says, well, you know, we're far away from Bucharest where nobody knows we're up here. He says, and we have quotas. And they also have a black market. They actually worked hard at not working. Because if you didn't meet your quota, it was worse than you went over your quota. So they knew how much they could make, and that's what they did. But if they made any more, they could sell it or do whatever with it. And so you could feel that the city was different, and it was. Then I guess I ought to stop with one of the, Virginia alluded to it. There were 4 things that stick out in my mind as really good teaching messages. One was the particular one there where, you know, I told Kathy, I said, Kathy, you're going to start a revolution here. She was getting those nurses really like, you know, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And they had very little self-worth. And she had George Rogers and myself, and she said, I want you guys to come into the room at a such a time and talk to the nurses. All right, you know, good, I'm going to give another talk, big deal. No. We stood in the room surrounded with nurses that were sitting. And she says, okay, ask them anything you want. Okay, that was not in my repertoire of essays or talks that I can give. And she'd been constantly harping on, you know, they need to understand that they are people of worth and can do well. And so I said, oh, okay, on the top of my mind, how am I going to deal with this? And it came out. I have no idea how it came out. It just came out. And I just said, you know, in the United States, let me tell you, chemotherapy is too important for doctors to do. We let the nurses do it. I got a standing ovation. But that was number 1. Number 2 was also a Romanian thing. Are any of you familiar with that little book, Who Moved My Cheese? Yes, okay. Now, for some reason, I don't know why, having been over there a few times, there was something there that wasn't being tapped. And for some reason, I decided I was going to give a lecture on who moved my cheese to a bunch of docs in Romania. And the story, if you don't know it, is about two cheeses, a bunch of cheese, and two mice decide that they're going to live there because that's where the cheese is, and they get all the cheese they want. And little by little, the cheese starts to dwindle, and it dwindles. And they move their families there and everything, and they're happy. And finally, one day, there's no cheese, which is sort of what was going on in Romania at the time, because you could either do the old way or the new way. If you held with the old way, well, you held with the old way. If you got on the train, you did the new way. And so one of them stays there and gets sick, and he's not eating, and his family's not doing well. This other guy goes out, he's looking for the cheese, and sooner or later he finds some cheese. And then he starts to get better, and his family gets better, but this family over here is starving. And so the moral of the story is, you know, when the rules of the game have changed, you got to change what you're doing. If you don't like what you're getting, change what you're doing. It's as simple as that. And I think that was one of my, and that's the only one I think George said, because he went to all of them. And he said, you know what, you son of a gun, you're the only one that ever got a standing clapping ovation. I'm sure there were better talks on medicine, but that was one. The other one, and I'll end it on this one. I'm making rounds on the unit, and I've got 1 or 2 residents and 3 or 4 students, and we making the rounds, and one of the patients has died, you know, maybe an hour before. And the parents are there, and the grandmother is there, and we're talking to them, and then I come out of the room, and the grandmother starts punching me. How did you let this happen? Yeah. And everybody's looking, what is the attending gonna do? Well, he did nothing. Didn't say anything, nothing. The end of the rounds, the end of the day, I said, tomorrow, no, the showing will be 2 or 3 days from now, and your assignment is to come with me, and we're going to that viewing. And you could think, I mean, the tension then in the back seat of my car was enormous. We were all in my car, so nobody could get lost. We went down there, and we went in, and the tension is building and building and building, and like, this guy's nuts. We went in there, and the first thing that grandmother did was come running across and hug me. And I could never have taught that. I could have said it over and over again. It would never have made the impression on them, and I only hope that they carried that kind of compassion out. That's enough. We're overdue. I only tried to solve problems that were a problem for me, and I get credit for what anybody would have done if they were in my shoes. Thank you.